lovely to be here. I'm not going to lie, I feel very conspicuously different among mountaineers, climbers, horse riders, adventurers. But I'm going to talk to you, as you heard, about the science of endurance performance. And I'm going to tell you that you as a human owe your humanness to the fact that you can run. In fact, it's one of the uniquely defining human characteristics is our ability to run long distances. And I'm going to explain to you how that works. So we start off with a man who you'd recognize as a great runner, Usain Bolt, winning the gold in Beijing. The reality is that if there were an animal Olympics, this man would be back of the pack because lions, cheetahs, horses all achieve speeds that are at least twice as fast, if not 3 times faster than Usain Bolt. And so he'd be a pedestrian compared to other animals. So it certainly pays to have 4 legs. When you look at Usain Bolt in Beijing when he broke the world record, he hit a top speed of 43 km an hour. A hippopotamus has been clocked at 50. And so had said hippo been in the same race as Usain Bolt, then he would not be looking at celebrating, he'd be looking at the hippo. Guys, I have 20 seconds, please. So fortunately, our survival as humans did not depend on speed. If it did, we'd be extinct. But what it depended on was the fact that we developed the ability to be the world's best distance runners. And there are 2 reasons for that. The one is anatomical, and the second one is thermoregulation. And I'm going to spend the next part of this talk just explaining to you very quickly those 2 factors. Just to give you some context, when we look at human beings, we say, are we great runners? Well, the answer is yes, because when we compare ourselves to other primates, gorillas are known to cover about 500 meters a day, dogs 10 Ks, wolves 14, and hyenas 19. And back in the day when God's dog was still a puppy and when Johannesburg looked like the Serengeti, humans developed the ability to run long distances. And today, the top Kenyans are still covering 200 Ks a week in training. The only animal that does more, incidentally, is the Alaskan husky, and that's not really voluntary, but humans do. And then, of course, there are races. This is a picture of the Gobi Desert Marathon, which I'm sure you know Ryan Sands won it. It's 250 K over a few days. And so the question is, how would you design a person to run this kind of distance? So let's look at the design specs. So the first thing is, we have developed, compared to primates on your right, humans on your left, we've developed these exceptionally long tendons. And they function like springs, and then we have short muscles. And what happens is, as your foot is coming to land on the ground, that tendon stretches, it stores energy, and then it recoils. And that saves us energy. As I walk, that doesn't happen, but as I run, it does. And so we are more efficient at running than we are at walking. Second point is we've got long legs, good for long strides, and short arms, which is also helpful. Doesn't help dragging your knuckles on the floor. Then we have the ability to rotate our body, because as this leg swings forward, if we couldn't rotate our pelvis, we'd be like a helicopter. It would just spin around. So the fact is, primates are anchored by the skeleton at the corset, and we're not. So we can rotate, and that makes us more efficient. We have a very large butt, which we sometimes don't want, but it helps because it assists upright running. And this is the main muscle that drives the leg backwards. That's a running tip, incidentally. Concentrate on that movement, you'll run faster. Seriously, that really is a tip. You heard it here first. Then the next thing is a stable head. So we can move our head across probably about 180 degrees, which is good because primates can't, and so they run into stuff. And we don't. And then finally, all the impact, hours and hours of running, huge impact on the skeleton. And what we've got is very large joint surfaces, and that spreads the impact. So that's how you would design a human to run. But that's not the key. The key is that we are able to lose the heat that we generate when we exercise. And humans have been called thermal warriors, and because that's the real challenge. It's all good and well to have a machine that can move far distances, but the thing is, we generate so much heat when we run, and the challenge is to lose that heat. And this is a video, Jim Peters, world record holder, 1954 in the Commonwealth Games, and it looks like someone has spiked this man's power rate. What he's doing is he's got heat stroke, and you can see he's lost all his coordination. That tells you that it affects his brain. He collapses, luckily in the shade. He was fine. They measured him later on. His body temperature was 41 degrees Celsius. And science tells us that there is an off switch at about 40 degrees Celsius. If your body temperature hits that, you stop. Turns out that's true in every animal, even cheetahs. And so they had cheetahs on a treadmill once, don't ask me, and they had them, and they found the same thing. And so 40 degrees Celsius is the limit. That's the point at which fatigue happens. And so when we exercise, we have to avoid that, right? That's where the dragons are. And so this is the temperature of a guy doing the Two Oceans Marathon. And you can see that he never gets there. And the question is why? And the answer is one thing, and that's sweat. So humans have got this ability to keep our body temperatures in a normal range for very long periods, and that's because we sweat. How important is sweating? So important that it's the sole thing that allows you to run. And humans are one of the only animals, the only primates certainly, that can sweat. And if you run at 5 minutes a K, at 25 degrees, at 70% humidity, you can run for 134 hours and 30 minutes before you reach 41 degrees Celsius. You never do that, right? But you could. I live in a world of theory, so bear with me. If you did not sweat, you would be able to run for 14 minutes and 50 odd seconds. And that's the difference, because if you didn't sweat, all that heat that you generate through muscle contraction would be stored up in the body. You'd hit 41 degrees Celsius and you'd end up like Jim Peters did. The problem with sweating is that we lose fluid, and we're conveniently designed to overcome that because humans are uniquely dehydration resistant. We've developed mechanisms that allow us to delay thirst. And so we don't have to have 600 mils of pyrite every 30 minutes. And that allowed humans to do something called persistence hunting. Because we knew that if we hunted, say, kudu, we'd be beaten every time. It got away, 15th time this week. And so what we figured out is that rather than relying on our sprinting, we rely on our endurance activity. And so what the African bushmen still do, and what humans used to do, is hunt in the hottest part of the day, find the biggest animal they could, and they just chased it and chased it and chased it. And eventually the animal overheated, and we didn't. And so literally, the fact that we have developed as humans, the fact that we're intelligent, we've got this nice big brain and we can make rational thought, that came about because we could hunt and eat all that good protein. And so humans survived and thrived because endurance running is what allowed us to hunt. And so therefore, the take-home message to you is that you should run because there is nothing else that defines you as human other than running. Thank you for your time.
All right, last question. One question only. Why are the Kenyans so fast? Who wants to know that? Come on, hey? That's a good question from a runner. Yeah.
So that is part of the answer. So it turns out one question with probably 7 different answers. There's a number of different reasons, so I'll try and oversimplify it as much as possible. I spoke about long tendons. A study came out recently looking at how some individuals have a gene that makes their tendons stiffer than others, and they tend to be the best long-distance runners. So there's a possibility that there's a genetic advantage there. There are possibilities that there are genetic advantages elsewhere in the muscle, so I'm sure that there's genes. But then on top of that, it's lifestyle. It's the fact that they have this cultural inclination to run. I'll never forget, I once saw a picture of 2 young schoolboys on the way to school and 2 Olympic champions running just in front of them. Because it turns out, here's a stat, 30 of the top 50 times in the marathon last year were Kenyans. 29 of those 30 came from one tribe in Kenya. And so the probability that my next door neighbor or the guy at the end of the road or something is an Olympic athlete is extremely high. And so they don't need to imagine success, they just have to follow it. And I think that helps a lot. And in this picture, there were 2 Olympic runners coaxing 2 small kids to keep up with them while they were out on a training run. And so these children at the age of 13, 14 are constantly being challenged. You can do this, you can be better, you can be faster. And I think that, with the right genes, altitude, diet, recipe is success.
All right, that's a comprehensive answer. All right, thanks very much, Ross.
Yeah,
appreciate it. Well done, bro. Thank you.